What do you mean by sociopathic?
Well, sociopathics very rarely have little remorse for what they do. They don't really acknowledge, what it is they do is necessarily wrong or care.
How is a sociopath formed?
From birth. That's a that's been a kind of a study on sociopathology for some time. The most theories say there was pretty much of a born type, maybe an organic brain dysfunction or something.
Not genetic, though?
Who knows? I mean, I've seen so much contradictory stuff over the years about these things. To say it's absolutely this and that, I won't go there.
What advice could you give to people who've got family or loved ones that are involved there?
Don't give up hope. That's what they want you to do. If you're on the outside, don't attack the group. But what you want to do is keep communication with the loved one inside. And the way you do this is you don't mention the group positive or negative. You talk about past events. Remember that wonderful fishing trip we had? In other words, what you're doing, you're bringing a little slice of reality back into their life. And you keep doing that. And, talking about fishing trips and that kind of stuff, that's not something their handler is really censoring at that point, because there's nothing about JZ or Ramtha or anything in there. But you keep that time, because almost all the ex-members talk about there's some point in time while they're in there, they had a question about, why am I doing this? And if there's still that good communication with the outside family, the chances are better that that individual will leave. Whereas, one of the control mechanisms is make your family and the outside so pissed off about what you're doing that all it is confrontation in any kind of conversation. So even if you want out, your family might be the last people you call. So we tell people, work on the communication, keep that communication up. Even if it's degraded between you and the loved one, have a cousin. Whatever. You can be creative with this sort of stuff. Keep that communication up. That's key.
And what would you say to people who are in RSE and they just absolutely refuse to have any contact with your family?
That's a tougher one. And of course, how do you influence that? All I can say to them is, keep that door open. If they should make a call, then jump on it. Obviously, you can't go up and grab by the scruff of the neck and say, call me. That's going to have to be initiated on them if there's that communication.
You would recommend not cutting the lifeline of connection. Somehow keep that connection alive.
Yes. Don't cut off that lifeline. Because a lot of times you got to remember that's not the individual that's speaking, that's the handler. And a lot of ex-members talk about almost like a dual personality. You have the cult persona and you have your own personality that's been squashed underneath the cult persona. So we talk to families about, hey, let's remember what you're dealing with here and keep that communication open.
That you're aware of, is there anything unique about RSE as a cult?
Compared to other ones, no. I mean, they all have their own little quirks, but on a whole, no.
And one of the things I was curious is, JZ says that she channels someone named Ramtha, and one of the things that keeps some people in the cult is the fact that Ramtha seems to know a lot of personal details about their lives. Really offers them advice. How do you think something like that is achieved?
You're searching you right now, you get a lot of personal information on you. And it's not that hard.
There is some information that I've been told, and they say, well, there's no way JZ could have personally known this information. And there's just no way.
She might have her own PI, go out and research something. I guarantee you she's just something like that. It's not some mystical power.
So you don't believe there is such a thing as,
Not in her case. No, hers is scam front and center.
And what is it that makes you so certain of that?
Too many reports, too many ex-member accounts. See, what I go by is, and again, the pragmatic side of me, If you got just one person bitching about something, it might be just a personality problem and a conflict. But there's been so many people that have come out of this over the years, and the stories are somewhat similar. That it leads a lot of credence. And then I read some of her stuff, and then read some of the articles that I pull up here. That's not much down my mind.
See, one of the problems is cleaning the stuff out of your mind, is that we want to keep what is sacred to us, what is
Sure.
precious, and sometimes it's so embedded in there.
Sure.
When you throw it out, you feel you've thrown out your foundation of your life.
This is a tough thing for an ex-member to deal with, because not everything inside the cult was bad. And so, I mean, the cult might overall have more negatives than pluses. And how do you substitute or separate what was good out of there from what was bad is a struggle a lot of ex-members have. And again, I don't have a magic formula for that either.
I was
For some, it was the friendships.
I was listening to James Randi give a talk, and he, as a skeptic as he is, he still has a mystical belief, or belief in the mysticism on a very personal level. He doesn't go into what that is. So he seems to have kept something
Sure.
for himself in that,
Sure.
but also is able to, tackle these issues.
Yeah, it's same kind of thing with all the biologists and all that. They may not be a religious person, but they believe that some higher power up there put all these cells together, to make life. So you got that too. I mean, and I don't want to interfere with that. It's just that some of the stuff that she practices is just con artist 101.
Absolutely.
And so, having been at it for 30 years, and there have been that many complaints and negative reports, how does she manage to stay in business?
No one's taken a coordinated effort to really look at her business dealings.
You mentioned earlier about there's a lot of statistical information out there, and you have collected quite a lot, and that's pretty much what we're doing on the website too, helping to put that information together. Particular statistics are missing in that that you would like to see researched and added to your library. Or
well, it's getting better,
base.
but it isn't there yet. I think, particularly from a lot of ex-members, some of their statistics, what got them in, what kind of things got them out, what was intriguing that got them in the first place, what was the breaking point, did you have points inside the group when you wanted to leave, what were those times, what kind of stress did you feel at that time. There's a myriad of things that could be studied.
Kodak moments.
Yeah, Kodak moments. Yeah, Kodak from hell.
Yeah.
But yeah, all
I
those
wish I
kinds
had
of
a
things.
camera in some of those times. You
Yeah.
know. I wish some of these people would take some camera and just
Yeah.
take some pictures.
So any more of that would be useful.
The human aspect, I
Yeah.
think, is important. Would you agree? The personal
Yeah.
experiences shared, and what I feel goes under the radar is the destruction of people's families and children's lives that just become caught up in that and destroyed pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps to be the next generation of cult leaders.
Yeah.
Now, in 1996, JZ introduced something called the wine ceremony, and she had everyone attending her events drinking at least one bottle of wine, perhaps more, over a...
Party.
Yes. What's your thought on that?
These groups are going to come up with things like that all the time, just little nuances and things that come out of their head. I don't put any more weight on that than I do anything else. It's just something she came up with, and who knows why. Because a lot of groups don't allow any alcohol or no drugs whatsoever. Some group is indulged, so I can't really make one thing or another out of that.
And then in 1999, she started to move overseas, taking her workshops to foreign countries. What's your thought on that?
Well, she probably used up the local area, so she's trying to find new fertile ground. That's not unusual.
But it's expensive.
But if the payback, if she can get some sucker across the ocean that hadn't been exposed to any of this and get a lot of money out of them, hey, it's worth it.
Hal, do you think there's any help? Like in our community, there's a lot of ex-members that are still pretty much hiding in the woods, put it that way.
Yeah.
They're still afraid of the government. A lot of, like myself, we become undocumented aliens, and we don't trust just about anybody outside. Where do you think they could turn to? They can't go back to their home countries. They've burnt their bridges.
I know, if at all possible, reestablishing contacts with their families. But you know, again, that's a tough one. It's important for former members to know that it wasn't them; it was the group. And maybe if they reach out and talk to some of their loved ones that they think they burned their bridges with, it might not be as bad as they think it is. Of course, sometimes it might be. You know, there's just no way to say that.
Well, life moved on for some of us. It's 20 years.
Yeah.
And some of these people are in their 60s now, going back to Australia. They're perhaps they're on social security.
Possibly.
If they even got back, and I'm seeing there's some here even that are in a dire straits still, health-wise, no health care.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering if there's any agency in the government area that can help them.
No.
Nothing there.
Well, like I said, we're putting together some things on, you know, healthcare and food banks and that. You know, there's no coordinated effort that I'm aware of.
And so it's a community, it's an outreach that we do as ex-members,
That's right.
helping one another.
That's right.
In the Elm, there's a family practitioner that's also involved in RSE that's been prescribing Prozac quite liberally throughout the years because it's been promoted
Sure.
by JZ Ramtha as being, you know, a medicine of sort, not a drug.
Mm-hmm.
And so at one time, just about everybody I knew was popping Prozac. I'm not sure what my question is, more of a statement, but what's your
What the
feedback
group
on that?
leader does and says, the followers follow. Remember Synanon, the so-called anti-narcotics group in California? It was called Synanon. They all shaved their heads because he decided he wanted to shave heads. Then he got a vasectomy, so all the guys got vasectomies. This is the people that put that rattlesnake in the mailbox out there, from one of the lawyers. What the group leader does is what a lot of times the followers will do to stay in good graces. But
So Hal, your wall is covered with awards. Could you?
my wall. The big one. This is the one that they were talking about. This is our big one. That's the United Way, Healthier Communities 2007. Over there is the Human Relations Commission to be acknowledged for some of the stuff you do, and the people that nominate us are usually the ex-members.
And besides the Rocky Mountain Resource Center, can you tell us the names of other organizations that you think are trustworthy and reliable?
Well, probably the largest national one is that International Cultic Studies. That's probably the most organized. There's a couple other groups I would recommend. Factnet.org.
Yeah,
It's one of the better online ones. Wellspring for a lot of ex-recovery people like that. It depends on the group. If you're dealing with hate groups, Southern Poverty Law Center is good. They have some resources there. But there's an awful lot of good ex-member support pages. And if you're coming out of a particular group, try to find the critic, like look for support or critics of, and see if you can find some support pages, because that's very helpful. Well, cult is a pejorative term. That's just anything that's unorthodox or spurious. I prefer destructive group. And again, that's a group that inhibits individual freedom of thought, the use of violence, deception, and or mind control.
And is there any connection to terrorism?
Well, Al-Qaeda certainly is cult-like. A closed society, you gotta kill yourself to bring honor to God and all this sort of thing. And those papers have been written about Al-Qaeda right and left and how cult-like that group is. Almost any extremist group is going to be cult-like.
And what generally happens to a cult after the leader dies?
Usually they fall apart. Unless they start institutionalized, like Scientology has so many levels of institutionalization that it just, like the Energizer Bunny, it just keeps going. But for most of the groups that are centered only around the personality of the leader, they usually fall apart.
There are techniques of mind control. You know, it's been demonstrated, particularly with this fellow I mentioned, Darren Brown. If you observe the techniques JZ Knight uses, some of them are very similar, how she can control a group through these techniques. My question is, do you feel she learnt those from just trial and error, or where did it...
Well, I can't say in her case, but I'd say a lot of it, if these group leaders will research it and use trial and error as they get better as they go along. And, you know, like I said, people pick up anything on the internet and learn techniques.
And one thing that JZ Knight is adept at is to place herself in an interview as a superior person. You know, she has a very keen IQ, photographic memory, so she comes across, you know, very charismatic. So any encounter with her, particularly with members, she's, you know, the alpha. Is that the term? Being in the group.
Well, that's also physical posturing. I know a lot of group leaders will kind of sit themselves in a chair so they're kind of looking down, kind of like the King of Siam approach. So they always have to look up at her. Stage lighting. A lot of it is just learned how to good theater.
Oh, yes.
In fact, a lot of ex-members consider their experience and what their group leaders were doing was bad theater. And that kind of fits. Because a lot of it is a theatrical presentation.
Yeah.
One of the activity that JZ Knight does is something called fieldwork. And participants of the school place cards with their picture against a fence, and then they put on blindfolds and walk around. JZ claims that if they focus on the card, they will come to it. But there is also a statistical probability that they will come to it. What would you say to students who go to the school believing that they're developing spiritual powers as a result of the fact that they found their card?
It's almost like magical thinking, and I don't know if I'm the right one to ask that thing to, rather than someone like Randy. It's, the guys that do the professional magician type stuff would probably answer that far better than I could.
Are you familiar with Ericksonian hypnosis?
Yeah, hypnosis, it can be useful in therapy. But the thing is with hypnosis is that a lot of times people think, well, you can make someone quack like a duck and that kind of stuff. And really, and almost any legitimate hypnotherapist will tell you this, is there's no hypnosis by itself that's going to make you go out and take a gun and go shoot someone. It doesn't work that way. In other words, hypnosis does not, in and of itself, make you do something that's contrary to your nature. Now, if you use that in conjunction with other things to reinforce that, that can be an add-on, but not in itself.
Right. That's another thing Darren Brown demonstrates, a mixture of hypnosis,
Yes.
Mind control, deception, subliminal programming, it's all there.
I'm starting to like this guy.
Oh, you should check it out.
Because that's right, it's a blend of stuff. It's not any...
Just a personal question on Randy. What's your opinion of him?
I like him.
You like
I
him?
met him. It was a long time ago. But I sat at a dinner table with him. And he was... got a kick out of him.
Yeah.
Then he did a talk. In fact, I get his tape over here. He did a talk that night on how magic is used to fool people into doing things. So, yeah, I like the guy. I got his book over there, too.
What do you think about the fact that no one's ever taken him up on his $1 million challenge?
Well, they've taken him up, but no one has ever really proven it. It's a little hard to fool a professional magician.
It's actually, I think, up to 3 million now, because there's another
Yeah.
institute, I believe, has added to the pot. And this is what often comes up in the L.A.R.S.E. Well, come on, guys, you're doing something miraculous here, or magical. Just go and collect your money from Randy, demonstrate it. But obviously, nobody is. It's
Well, gee, I wonder what's
Yeah, I
going
wonder
on
why.
there.
there's this trend of creating, what do they call them? These documentaries that are really advertisements. They're kind of camouflage. They fool you.
Yeah.
You think, like, you can rent a movie, say from Blockbuster.
Infomercials.
Infomercials. And I get these movies and I think this looks interesting. And halfway through, I'm realising I'm on a born again Christian crusade, and it's all disguised as this little adventure for a fella and his dog. Are you seeing that's one of the methods that's being used by these people?
Sure,
More and more.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are getting more techno savvy. And, I mean, how many online predators are using the internet now? I mean, yeah, there's lots of tools out
Networking.
there. Yeah, there's all sorts of tools out there.
Right.
And what is the New Age?
I don't have a clue. That's a term I've heard for years, and no one's been able to define it for me. Some will say it's a mixture of paganism, witchcraft, folklore, name it and claim it. I don't even like that term.
It is a market term, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is.
Even when you, like, as a musician, I create music, so what term do I use? And there it is, New Age, and then, well, New Age shops and
But the New
products.
Age thing, it could be a relaxation tape. It could be. I've from day one, I've not liked that. The only reason I use it in my files is just a popular term. But yeah, to answer your question, I can't.
To sell a lie, you can add some truth in there. That's the way I see it. And JZ is expert at pulling out information with her memory abilities and putting a package together. And she'll use certain truths in there, and then manage that for her own means. Do you think that's a lot of organisations, cults do that? They have a certain amount of truth in there.
Oh, sure, you're gonna have some truth in there.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of groups will have that. We want to make the world a better place. How you do that? Well, we're going to make all mankind work and teach you, deal with each other tolerance. Hey, that's a great idea. That's not what the group's really about, but it's a great hook to bring someone in. They're going to appeal to your idealism.
Yeah, that's right. Because I don't know one person that didn't come to RSE as an idealist, kind person that was willing to go out on a limb.
Well, nobody joined Jonestown by Jim Jones and say, hey, we're all going to Ghana and drink cyanide-laced Kool-Aid in the jungle. They're not going to do that.
And even Jim Jones probably didn't have that in his head when he
didn't have that in his mind either. So no, they're gonna appeal to the idealism.
Do you know how the senator became involved in investigating that?
You know who you want to talk to about that is Patricia Ryan.
Patricia Ryan?
That's his daughter. Oh, okay. So you're talking about the Congressman Leo Ryan, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he got calls from the State Department, and he was getting calls too from families about this group that was going on out there. But Patricia Ryan, I think she even wrote a book about it. She would be a good one to talk to about that.
So is she still active in public?
She did for a long time. I don't know if she's still active. Very nice lady. I've done
Was she a survivor?
Yeah.
Got out from the compound.
But yeah, talk to her because I don't want to do secondhand stuff when you can talk to the horse's mouth itself.
You've been doing this for years. You've been dealing with particularly hate groups, violent groups. Has there been any effect on your family, yourself personally? Any threats to you?
Oh, anything to deal with human rights and civil rights is a calculated risk. I mean, how many people died during the Voting Rights Act? And yeah, I get threats.
How do you see that? How do you deal with that?
Well, I take some common sense approaches. I keep my family out of it. I don't publish my home phone, that kind of stuff. Although, if you really want to find something, you can. But, you know, I don't do things generally alone without people knowing where I'm at. In other words, I'm not going to wander up to the Ku Klux Klan rally by myself anymore. When I was young and stupid and blue-eyed and blonde, got me into a lot of these groups. Now they'd find me upside down in a trash can because they know what I look like. So I don't do that anymore. And just some common sense stuff. But anything to do with civil rights and human rights, you're opening yourself up to people like this.
But you carry on, you still do it?
Yeah.
Why?
It's just my nature. I'm very much into public service. I didn't spend 22 years in the military if I wasn't. I'll give up hope and keep playing. And that it's hard. There is no magic bullet in recovery or getting somebody out. It's a very individual thing. But don't ever give up. Don't ever give up hope that your loved one may never get out. Don't put that thought in your head. Always keep an open communication. Don't give up hope.
And you know what? We're coming back now at the very beginning. You spoke about prevention and how prevention is the better solution. You know, I never knew what a cult was. I had no idea I was in one. So, what sort of public education campaign would you suggest?
Colleges, universities. I spend, well, you saw how many colleges I get here. I spend a lot of time in colleges and universities.
Teaching about destructive and hate groups so that people can learn how to identify them.
Tactics and techniques. But I also believe in this, and this is part of a theology type, the only theological part I have, is at a university that's got a strong interfaith type group. Like, see, and I don't mean just Christian. I mean, the interfaith over here has Baha'is, and they've got all the other groups, the Muslims. If you got a good, strong interfaith group on these campuses where these students can go explore different faiths and religions in a safe setting, the less attractive they would be to destructive groups recruiting on campus.
What's your thought on the Campus Crusade for Christ?
Not my cup of tea. I wouldn't put them in my top 10 most dangerous, but they're pretty high demand.
And what do you mean by high demand?
A lot of your time is for spiritual laws, and a lot more demanding than say a more loosely knit group.
And who are some of the groups in your top 10?
Well, certainly clan groups, Christian identity, cult-wise. I'd have to put a lot of what we have up here, what I call personality groups that don't have a name or a quote-unquote theology. It's based on the person's charismatic leadership, end up with all sorts of sexual abuse, pedophile type stuff. That has to be probably one of my biggest concerns right now. The polygamy groups, Warren Jeffs is way up there.
And are you familiar with prosperity cults?
That's more of the name it and claim it kind of stuff. Yeah, and that's kind of cropped back into some of the evangelical circles too. I think that can open up to potential scams.
And one of JZ's favorites lines is you create your own reality. What's your response to that?
I'd have to hear the whole context to comment on it.
That is it.
That's it. Yeah. I don't know, it's kind of like if my shoe's there, I will put it on. I mean, how simplistic. I mean, come on. Today's the first day of the rest of your life. Oh, well, that's nice. If I want that kind of stuff, I'll go to the Chinese restaurant and open up my fortune cookie. That's all. That's it. That I don't put any weight in that stuff. That means nothing. It's just a little catchphrase.
So one of your suggestions was for to get in touch with ex-members, aside from the World Wide Web. Are there any telephone hotlines that you're aware of? Anything like that?
The web is the best way to do it because most of these people want to keep kind of innocuous, and anonymous kind of stuff. So they can post stuff on the web and have a website that's fairly safe for them to operate.
And have you heard any stories of cult leaders creating problems to the websites?
Oh, sure. Scientology hates it when people expose what they're doing. And they will try to, but they haven't been very successful. Almost all their lawsuits have been thrown out. Well, the other thing, too, if you got a lot of money and you're head of one of these groups, you can sue just to harass. You don't expect to win. It'll drive them into bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
That's one problem with our judicial system that's wrong, is when people like that can abuse that system. I mean, our system's better than most, but it isn't perfect, and that's one flaw in it.
Sure.
It's allowing these guys to sue like that.
Have you ever found yourself on the end of a lawsuit like that?
No, I've been on the other side. But most of my stuff is criminal prosecutions.
Of hate groups?
They don't like me at all because I put them behind bars.
There's people that join RSE, they don't realize this, but when they turn up to do an event, they're asked to sign a document. It's called the non-disclosure document. Pretty much it's like a 15-paragraph gag order describing what you can and cannot do, and particularly talking about what goes on behind those gates. What's your opinion of that? Is that a legally binding document?
Well, you can ask a lawyer on it, but
we have,
and it's got no standing.
That's what they say.
Yeah, and there's no standing on that. It's a fear and intimidation technique.
That's purely what you think it is. It's just for
Absolutely.
control and
That's right.
For the employees.
and for somebody that wants to talk about what goes on behind the scenes there, you feel they
Go
should
for it.
go for it. All right, I want to thank you
Sure. No
personally and on behalf of EMF for having us come here, and your time and knowledge. It's been great. Really appreciate it.
problem. No problem.